Welcome back. Airstrikes in Syria. President Obama has decided to allow airstrikes to defend Syrian rebels trained by our military from any attackers. The move comes after the rebels came under heavy fire by about 50 al-Nusra fighters Friday in northern Syria. Now the question becomes whether or not these airstrikes will raise the risk of our military coming into direct conflict with the Assad regime. For more on this story, let's welcome in J.D. Gordon, former Defense Department spokesman. Also joining us, my former colleague in the U.S. Congress, former Congressman Michael Patrick Flanagan. Both these gentlemen from Newsmax, Washington. As always, we thank you for your time here on Newsmax Prime. And J.D., what about this notion? Our airstrikes increasing the chances of a direct confrontation with the Assad regime?
Hi, J.D. Good to see you. Well, perhaps, but we have to take this risk because if we're training Syrian rebels, we have to protect them from Bashar al-Assad. Bashar al-Assad would target them first if he could because he wants to make this a contest between his government and the Islamic State, ISIS. So any moderates out there are really the threat to him long term. So he would go after those guys first. It's a smart move. It's a little late, unfortunately, but that's a risk we're going to have to take.
Mike Flanagan, do you agree with J.D.'s assessment?
I do, and it's not just that we're risking being in conflict with Assad, it's the other way around. Assad risks being in conflict with us. He would like to extinguish moderate rebels that are there. That was his whole purpose in the beginning. And now that we're going to protect them, it's him coming into contact with us, not the other way around.
You know, J.D., according to reports we've seen in congressional testimony, less than 60 Syrian rebels have completed the training program and re-entered this fight against ISIS. President Obama and his team were counting on about 3,000 to join the fight. When you have numbers that low, doesn't that create a real difficulty in and of itself?
Yeah, it's a real difficulty. It's not based on reality. They were supposed to train thousands a year. They've only got to 60. This reminds me of a university classroom setting. You might as well call it White House U, because these guys are not connected to reality. They're connected to things that sound great in a university classroom in a faculty setting. So I think the president has not got this right from day one, and clearly it's a failure because these guys are not operating in reality, and they've got to start by naming the threat that we have, and that's the threat of radical Islam that's been coming after this country since the 1970s. They're not going to stop until the ideology stops.
Gentlemen, we have about 3 minutes left, so Michael Patrick Flanagan, we're going to shift hotspots, if you will, and move on to Yemen. According to reports, the Saudi-led Arab coalition has deployed 3,000 troops and battle tanks in Aden. What does this mean for the conflict there in Yemen?
I have very low confidence in Saudi capacity to accomplish their goal on their own. If we enter or someone from the West enters in a solid and forceful way, I think there's a possibility of some success for the Saudis. But at best, they will hold off the inevitable for some amount of time.
J.D., you heard Mike. He's a little skeptical about the Saudis and this Arab coalition. Do you share Mike's doubts on this?
Yeah, I agree with Mike. I think the Saudis just don't really have the capability to get what it takes to defeat the Houthi rebels. The Houthi rebels are being backed and trained and also have arms from the Iranians. And so I think that the Saudis just don't really have what it takes. They need somebody like us to actually give them some more support there to defeat them, because this is all part of a large proxy war, and the Iranians are pushing around other countries there. They all already control the capitals of Lebanon, Syria, Iraq. They control the capital now in Yemen, too, and I just don't think the Saudis really have the capability to get it done. Even though they buy a lot of weapons, they just don't have the tactics, techniques, and operations to get the job done, unfortunately.
All right, about a minute 15 left. The Iran deal remains a top priority for this administration. Secretary of State Kerry meeting with foreign ministers from the Persian Gulf in an effort to get them on board. Let's listen to what John Kerry had to say, then we'll ask you both for your reaction.
There can be absolutely no question that if the Vienna Plan fully implemented, it will make Egypt and all the countries of this region safer than they otherwise would be.
Michael Patrick Flanagan, you heard our Secretary of State. Anything in that statement that you agree with?
You told me it was made by John Kerry, so I'll agree with that, but that's about all I can do there. There is absolutely zero chance anybody's safer if Iran gets the bomb, and this deal virtually guarantees they're getting the bomb sooner rather than later. Period. End of discussion.
Just one more point, though, from J.D. Gordon. And J.D., 20 seconds for you to make that point.
Well, hopefully the Congress can defeat this, because it's a nightmare for the United States, for our Arab allies, could spell the end of Israel. This guarantees Iran's going to get a nuclear weapon, because this accord is so weak. You know, we have all the cards, JD. The U.S. and the EU, we have $1 trillion in our defense budgets a year. Iran's got $10 billion. Yet President Obama acts if the numbers were reversed. We've got to stand up, and we've got to defeat this deal before it's too late.
J.D. Gordon, Michael Patrick Flanagan. Gentlemen, you have our thanks. We're coming right back.